Look, Davante Adams, not the youngest receiver out there that you can get. He's not. But that was Tom Curran on February 18th. Geez, I don't know. 2 years, $65 million guaranteed. Give it to Davante Adams.
Make it happen.
Does that get it done? And it's like, I don't know, Curran floats out A.J. Brown's a more reasonable get than T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk and who was the other one on his list? DK Metcalf. All these guys who are supposedly available. That's interesting. Curran says a couple of weeks ago, right after Valentine's Day, oh, yeah, by the way, I don't know. He wasn't even released by the Jets yet. 2 years, $65 million guaranteed to Davante Adams.
Sold.
Maybe that would be something that could get done.
Sold.
So interesting. That's why Curran is worthwhile. Here, you can catch him every week on a Tommy Tuesday, high noon, on Jones and Keefe. You can go back and seek it out. Odyssey app, AUDACY. Get it on your phone. Free, easy. Take it with you wherever you go. Or seek out those full interviews on YouTube. Just subscribe to WEEI. Probably a lot of angry Eagles fans commenting on the YouTube story yesterday.
They're fired up
about A.J. Brown. What about Davante Adams? That feels, to me, if I'm being reasonable, the more obvious get. The name they can get much easier, and he would cost you a lot less. A lot of guaranteed money, but less in terms of draft capital.
So there's no draft picks like T. Higgins and DK Metcalf. I also think he has more left in the tank than even a Deebo Samuel. Obviously not a huge draft pick compensation like with A.J. Brown. So if you're just looking at who is a real free agent, I think it's only he and Godwin that would make a huge difference on the team. Everybody else you can sort of argue like what's left of Amari Cooper and like that. I'm not really interested in that list after those top two guys. So I would do whatever it takes. I know you've been of the mindset that Godwin probably stays in Tampa, and you might be right.
That's what I think. If Godwin becomes available, I'm interested. But I don't see him leaving Tampa.
So there's a good chance Adams is the best player at that position to just sign with another team. There might be another trade somewhere or whatever. But, yeah, if you can get him and it's just money, there should be nothing standing in the way of you at least offering him the biggest contract. He's not going to get a deal like – Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or even DK Metcalf. He is not going to become the highest paid receiver in the history of football. He is going to get a ton of money for the next couple of years, but you should be in that market. You should, whatever it is, you should top it.
Okay, so Davante Adams, tell me if this matters or not. He hasn't made a Pro Bowl in the last 2 years after making 6 straight. He has now been on, he's moved teams a handful of times since 2021. He played 2.5 seasons with the Raiders, and then had the last half season with the New York Jets. So he's bounced around. He hasn't been a Pro Bowler. He's going to be 33.
All right.
A lot of his numbers last year, like for everybody who hates...
Are you trying to deter me
from
Davante Adams?
I'm just saying, for everybody who hates on Calvin Ridley, Calvin Ridley and Davante Adams' numbers really were not that different last year.
Okay.
Adams barely cracked 1,000 yards. Ridley cracked 1,000 yards. I think Adams did a lot of stat padding at the end of the year, too. I'm still very interested, but...
You're trying to point out some of the flaws, but this is also why he's available.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. The reason he's out there and available, I'm not going to turn my nose up at him, but I would understand if people say he's 33, he hasn't made a Pro Bowl for 2 years, he was stat padding last year, he's been bouncing around teams, how good of a teammate is he, how much of a winner is he, like all these things, which I think would be fair with Davante Adams. I'm paying him. You need talent, you need a receiver. I'd do it. But I get the hesitation if fans have any hesitation. Or if teams have hesitation.
His last 2 years in Green Bay, he was probably the best receiver in all of football.
Okay, but now we're going back to...
I know, no, just let
we're
me...
We're now going back to Cooper Kupp, Triple Crown, wide receiver, greatest season of all time.
I would take Cooper
2021,
Kupp also.
same year.
I'm just painting the picture. You were talking about his last few years. So what I'm saying is he was the best receiver in football. Then the Packers weren't going to pay him. That was a Packers thing. They decided to sign draft all these young guys, which... they seem to be okay at. We'll see if any of them really emerge to the level of Adams, who's the guy they also drafted in the second round. So they were sort of changing course, right? The Jordan Love era and all this other stuff. So Adams leaves, goes to the Raiders.
I'm looking it up. For a first and second round pick.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember, though, at that time, you're like, that's a lot. Or it's Cole Strange and Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah.
Which I would have done.
Or what it actually ended up being Quay Walker and Alec Pierce. Like, kind of the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So... you could have had him, the Raiders, and he lived up to his end of the bargain. The problem was Josh McDaniels was a bad coach, or a bad head coach. He's a really bad head coach. They never should have hired him to be their head coach, and the Raiders were a mess. But his first year with the Raiders, 100 catches, 1,500 yards, and led the league with 14 touchdowns. I know you're going to say that was 2 years ago. Okay, it's 2022. The next year, 2023, the quarterback position's much worse, right? Derek Carr no longer, and it's 1,100 yards, 103 catches, and 8 touchdowns.
It's nice.
With bad quarterbacks and a bad team that ultimately fired McDaniels, went to Antonio Pierce, and they were a mess. This next year, he comes back with the Raiders, who are full-on in dysfunction, and they end up, he gets traded, he wants out of there, and he goes to play for Aaron Rodgers. So he likes playing with Aaron Rodgers. He had a lot of success with Rodgers. Derek Carr was his college teammate, and he got a lot of money from the Raiders. So I don't fault him for that. If the Packers offered him the most money, he would have been on one team probably this whole time. And you're right, there was some stat padding. It's hard to really make sense of the year with the Jets. I mean, he still had a 1,000-yard season total. He still had 8 touchdowns total.
I mean, people hate 1,000-yard receivers, though, because they all think Calvin Ridley stinks.
Not me, though. So, I'll take Ridley. I just think he's better. I think he still has something left in the tank. I think you have to understand, though, with him, Chris Godwin has more prime years left. A.J. Brown certainly has more prime years left. He is 32. He'll be 33 sometime in the season. But I think if you sign him to a 2-year deal, I think you get good production for 2 years.
2 years, $65 million. Fully guaranteed?
Yep.
Not only would you do it, he'd do it.
Yeah.
Is he going to get better than that on the market?
Well, how much sway does Aaron Rodgers have on his next team? I would think not as much as he did with the Jets.
Nowhere near as much as he had on the Jets.
But selling the whatever GM on Davante Adams versus Alan Lazard is a big difference.
Yeah, but
you might be able to get Adams.
But here's the thing. What would scare me about Rodgers is him being able to lobby Adams to take less, right? You don't need take our deal instead. But it's not going to be.
He's like, how are you getting $40 million? I'm getting 10.
It's not going to be Rodgers' ability to lobby a new owner on throwing that money at Adams. It's going to be lobbying Adams to take less, is what I would worry about. The odds are out, by the way, courtesy of DraftKings.
Okay.
The favorite to land Davante Adams, plus 190. Green Bay Packers.
What? Back to the Packers?
That's the favorites according to DraftKings.
Keep his house.
Don't yell at me. Next up on the list.
Raiders.
Chargers, plus 500.
So that makes sense. Chargers, it would be a good spot for him.
Chargers make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
49ers at plus 650. I'm imagining Ayuk would move in that scenario.
Well, Debo's already gone.
Yeah, I'm imagining they would do
and
more
Ayuk?
moving. Well,
okay.
I don't know, to throw a bunch of money at Davante. Maybe they'd do it, but I would think that's an indication Ayuk might move.
Well, those 3 teams all are better than the Patriots.
Rams at plus 750. All of those teams outside of Green Bay, where he's played before. Chargers, Niners, Rams, 2 through 4 on the list. They're all West Coast teams. Rap Sheet said yesterday
There's a report.
He prefers to play on the West Coast.
Is he a West Coast guy, right? He's a California guy.
He is.
Yeah.
Steelers are plus 950. Broncos and Patriots tied at plus 1,000.
You're telling me there's a chance.
Raiders are 12-1, so plus 1,200. There's your list.
So out of those top 10 teams that are interested in him or whatever, according to those odds, if he simply goes to the team offering the most money, which I think there's a chance of, then the Patriots have a chance. But if he's prioritizing Aaron Rodgers, then obviously there's no chance. And if he's prioritizing a Super Bowl in the next 2 years, there's also no chance.
No. You better You better give up that money.
I don't know. I mean, I would think most players, my default is most players just going to look for the most money. But if the money is the same and he likes the West Coast over the East Coast, well, then you're also going to lose that.
So a couple of things. Text line 617-779-7937. Adam says he wants to go to the West Coast. Why are you discussing that? Well, number one, we already said that.
Yep.
Number two,
sometimes guys
change
their minds.
If he's getting $55 million guaranteed to go to the West Coast over 2 years or $65 million guaranteed to come play here, which one would he take? I at least think that's a decision.
I love the East Coast.
I at least think it's a decision. I don't know what he would take, but that you don't think you could influence him in any way by throwing more money at him? So that's why we're talking about it. Yep. I don't care that he wants to go to the West Coast. That's what he's putting out there. The favorite, according to DraftKings, is Green Bay. Is that on the West Coast?
It's not about finance.
Okay. Also, how about this? No more 30-year-old rejects.
Rejects?
We want younger studs to grow with Drake May.
So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they get him. He shows up to camp and he looks awful. But does this feel like Reggie Wayne, Torrey Holt, Eric Decker, all these guys? I don't think so.
Nope.
He's got way more left in the tank than those guys.
And I agree with that to a degree. It's like, yeah, ideally, in a perfect world, I want a young stud receiver to grow with Drake May.
Yeah, me too.
Those guys might not be available.
They have 4 of them on the team right now.
The best free agent might be Davante Adams. That might be the best free agent.
But this is also the kind of year that they really need to add 2 at that position. This needs to be the Randy Moss, Wes Welker. You know, the Patriots and Bill Belichick saw how bad the receivers were in 2006. They said, all right, Tom, sorry about that. We apologize. We're going to go out there. Actually, they added 3 Dante Stallworth was new that year, too.
Ooh, yeah.
When they first brought in Stallworth, wasn't he the first one out of those three? And you're like, oh,
Maybe.
he's good.
Yeah.
And then they're like, we're also getting Welker and Moss. You're like, oh, my God.
He had one long touchdown against Dallas that year.
He's fast.
I don't remember him doing much else.
He's fast.
Yeah, no, he's fast.
He was definitely fast. But they added 3 different guys to that group. They could take a page out of that playbook.